Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of AAC in the Cloud. This will be the final session of the day today, and we're excited to have you here as part of that. This session will be presented by Sharon Redmon, and her topic is interactive reading for AAC users and building schema. So we will turn things over to her.
Thanks, Melissa. I really appreciate it. Everybody can hear me okay? I'm coming to you live from Kansas, which is very exciting. I've kind of been all over the US in the last few weeks. So made it to my sister's house just in the nick of time to be able to present this. So I'm super excited for us to be here together at AAC in the Cloud, taking the next step. It's just a really powerful conference, and I'm just so proud to be a part of it. So thank you. If you have any questions, I'm going to save some time at the end. So go ahead and you can let Melissa know, and then we'll explore those after. So you're in the session of interactive reading, also some shared reading, and how we do this with our AAC users. And what I have found is that we need to be building some schema for some of that background knowledge, that vocabulary. So we're really going to dive deep in that today. So I'm Sharon Redmon. I am a special education teacher and assistive technology specialist. I've been working in the field for a little over 20 years, and my passion is assistive technology. I consider myself a Waddy baby from Wisconsin originally, and now also part of the Wadern Wisconsin Assistive Technology Regional Network. So check those out. Check out Mike's page. We're going to be presenting tomorrow, Mike and I. So I'm super excited for that session, talking about his journey becoming an AAC user and a writer. And so I've worked in the field for about 20 years. I'm currently teaching in a small school district in Washington State. And so what you're going to be seeing today is lots of videos and pictures of the work that we've done in this building of schema and vocabulary with AAC users. So welcome. All right, so today what we're going to be exploring is looking, like I said, these shared reading experiences and really understanding that comprehension and looking at comprehension. There's lots to explore, but these are the few things that we're going to do today. We only have a short 50 minutes. So we're going to take a look at, really looking at connected text. I'm going to be showing you clips from the curriculum that I use, which is Readtopia. And we're also going to be looking at some vocabulary and how I build that vocabulary with our AAC users in using techniques like descriptive teaching and using this tool, which I love and so excited to be showing people and how to use this tool, the expanded expression tool, and how I use that with our AAC users. And really then looking at how do you build that background? How do you build that schema? How can we bring in some YouTube videos and audio files to make things exciting? So we're gonna first start kind of with some shared language. When Mike and I present, we always like to really make sure we talk about modeling. We talk about these ideas and these concepts about presuming this potential and presuming that competence with everyone and everything that we do. And really, I feel that's the roots. Those are the roots of this big tree that we're trying to build, right? I mean, you need to have not even the foundation yet. It's everything that's kind of layered that is sitting in that we need to be to grow and to have our AAC users grow to be competent AAC users and communicators. Course modeling, aided language stimulation. I love talking about that a lot. We'll see how the last 2 years of us using aided language stimulation has really started now to blossom. And you can see that when we're doing our interactive and shared reading. And we're also going to see accepting all these communication attempts. So, and how you can do that and build meaning during this time with them. All right, well, so let's start and jump right in. So first, kind of with some of the boring bits, but the important pieces, right? This research. And so what we have is we know we have a lot of research out there on reading. And I look to that research really to kind of kind of pick apart, because we know that reading is so complicated, that we know that reading, writing, communication, and listening are all really intertwined. And so we're going to be taking, and not that the rope is fraying, but we're just going to be taking one piece of this rope and looking at Scarborough's reading rope and understanding that there's so much that goes just into this reading. And there's no way during this time together that we can hit all of this. So we're going to be really looking at that language comprehension, that upper part of the rope, where we're going to be looking at building that comprehension by increasing background knowledge and increasing some vocabulary. So it's really, let me just grab my notes. I want to make sure I get everything here. So it's really making sure that we have that basis and that understanding. And we know that this is with the science of reading and through our structured literacy and structured literacy approaches that are now really the forefront of our reading instruction, that we take a minute to take a look at what is that research saying. And we know we need to build this background knowledge. We know we need to build this vocabulary. And so then we look at some more research. And if you don't have this book, you need to go buy the book, because it has really changed my teaching. I feel I have done all the bits and parts that have been in this book, and that was very validating to me. But what was happening is it gave me a really great structure to be able to expand what I was doing when it came to literacy instruction with our complex communication and kids with complex communication needs and complex bodies. And so and it filled in those missing pieces for me. And so kind of I see it as the Bible of literacy for our students with significant disabilities. And it is really important so that you have this book. So please, you get nothing from this presentation, get that you need to go get this book. So where we're going to look at is this chapter on page 102, where they talk about vocabulary and reading comprehension in this chapter 7. And they really go into depth. And what Karen and David talk about is this idea of background knowledge, which is no different than what we know through the science of reading. But we do know also that with individuals with disabilities, that their experiences with books and with places and activities has been less. And we need to give them a little bit more to be able to increase that schema, right? So we need to build that background, make those connections between that text, and so we can build that comprehension. So how do we do this? Well, how I do this is I really start with some connected text. And so what you're going to be seeing today is me and my students and how we've been using Readtopia's Fact or Fiction, the Wizard of Oz book. And so having authentic literature is just really important for our students to be exposed to, and utilizing all the activities that come within Readtopia has been really powerful for me. We're going to be looking at how we need to do the crowd in the car, and our next slide will talk a little bit about that. And included also for this need for vocabulary and this need for building this schema is really when you're having those shared activities for kids not to be passive participants, but to be active participants. And to be an active participant in a shared or an interactive reading or a closed reading activity, you need to have words. You need to have and understand the meaning of those words to be able to participate. And we're also going to be kind of looking, because having a little STEAM is always going to be engaging and bringing in that meaningfulness to our students and getting them engaged and excited. So we're going to look at this vocabulary and connected text through using really engaging materials. And I've just seen that and have used Readtopia in order to do that. So all right, so we're going to go through, I just wanted to touch a little bit on crowd and in the car. So this is an approach used. This handout's from Jane Farrell. So I love go and check out her information about how to really embed this. There's also the Tar Heel shared reading modules, which are amazing. I use this for PD for all of my paraprofessionals. So if I'm going to be asking them to do a shared reading experience or to do an interactive reading experience and to participate with us and then be able to assist and model and work with the student that they are working with, they need to know how this works. They need to know what this means. Just can't say, hey, do a car, and they're going to know that. So really using these modules has been really beneficial. And you get a certificate at the end, which who doesn't like certificates? So check out those reading modules. So we're going to be looking at CAR, this idea of comment, question, and respond, and then putting the crowd into that CAR. So looking at this, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but this completion, the recall, open, asking these questions, and then building that bridge between that schema, right? That distance piece is so important. So how can you make a connection from you to the text, from the world to the text? How can you make these connections during these interactive and shared reading activities? And so what I found is when I started doing this with shared and interactive reading is that my students were struggling. I would make a comment, I would ask the question, and then I would wait for the response, and there would be crickets. And I realized that I really needed to go and teach what I needed them to do for that active participation. They didn't know, they hadn't experienced that. And so for my emergent learners, my emergent readers, emergent communicators, this was really hard. They hadn't ever experienced this before. So I knew we needed to do some background building of vocabulary. And so I went on a search, and I didn't have to go far, and the expanded expression tool just popped up. And I knew that that was going to be the key, because if you haven't used it, please take it. There's a link there to the website and to Sarah's work. And using this tool as a multimodality approach to vocabulary building, to expanding our background knowledge, expanding the meaning of vocabulary. I saw this also as being able to use the words that we have. So when you look at Gail Van Tatenhome's descriptive teaching model and approach, in that if you don't have, which we know we can't have all the words in our communication devices, but we have core words in our communication devices. And so what can you use to be able to, instead of, to describe? And that's what this tool does so nicely, is that it is, like I said, it has that multimodality approach. It has visual supports. Love some visual supports. These are really great. And so now we are using these tools with everything that we do when we are exploring new vocabulary in our text. So I did want to just talk a little bit more. I have just this note on this vocabulary building in this descriptive teaching. And so if you have a chance to really go and take one of Gail's classes, she offers those often. I took one last summer talking about this descriptive teaching method, and it's just so powerful to be able to use. And so her description of this is this, and I just wanted to read this quick. So using a descriptive style of the, sorry, let me try that again. Using a descriptive style, the teacher mentions and references the content-specific words, then teaches the concepts behind the words using high frequency and reusable common words. And so when you look at that approach, and I looked at the EET tool, I just saw how this was such a perfect marriage of approaches to be able to explore this with my students. So how do we go about doing that? How do we go about using and building this vocabulary? Well, first it starts, like I said, with this connected text and building background. So we have our book of The Wizard of Oz, and we started with then bringing in videos. I live in Washington State right now. We typically don't have tornadoes. So my students had never experienced what a tornado was or what that meant. So we went and got YouTube videos and watched videos here on tornadoes. And then we did a STEM activity and made a tornado. And so this is, let me just show you this quick little video. So which they loved doing. They loved being able to spin these around and to really experience what that tornado looked like. So let me just hide these tools really quick. Okay. So I've been having trouble with the video playing when I'm trying to turn the page. So if anyone knows how to make that not happen, that'd be great. Let me know. So we not only now have some videos, we have this connected text. Let me go back really quick. My students have their AAC devices. We're working on finding those words, building up their knowledge so that we can then now start having these interactive and shared activities of reading. I have a student who uses eye gaze, and so she didn't have any access to any of the vocabulary that we were using. So we built that for her, and I was super excited. You know, we used a board maker here, but there are lots of other tools out there that you can use to build those visual supports, to build their communication device. And here we have her paras modeling what we're talking about with the house starts to spin. So we have these pieces now, our YouTube videos, we have, excuse me, we have our AAC devices. We are modeling all these techniques. And oh, this video, I tried really, really hard to get this video up and running, and maybe I can still do it. That's why we started a few minutes late. But I wanted to dive in and show you how this tool and descriptive teaching can work. So what we would do is I would put on a video. I would use the videos that were embedded within the lessons within Readtopia. I would go and find different videos about the heart. And for this example, we played the sound of a heart beating while we were listening. And I think I do have that. So I can see if that works. I don't know if it's gonna work. That's all right. I tried. So we played these sounds. We really immersed ourselves into the heart. And when we started working and describing the heart, I didn't say the word heart. We first described everything about it before I brought that word. And I want you to show, and let's see if this video will work. Let's see if I can get it.
So, like, she picked heart. Like, it was a Valentine's heart.
You're right. She made a connection, didn't she? Maybe she didn't know where heart was on her talker, but she knew where Valentine was. And that to her made a connection.
Valentine.
Yeah, Lisa. Wow, that's so smart.
So we're going to pause that and come back. So for her, and I loved making these, I talked earlier about how pieces that are important, that are those roots that we need to have and to nurture. And being able to look at a student and have her make a communication attempt when we were saying, and before that video, or before the piece that you saw, we were talking about, okay, we know all these pieces. Does anybody know what this word is or what we would call this? And she came out and said Valentine. And her little neighbor next to her said, wow, that was amazing, because she didn't have that word. She didn't know where heart was. And she used Valentine, and everybody celebrated that. And so we needed to just stop for a minute and say, we are going to honor that communication attempt. We are going to honor her vocabulary and her knowledge that she's bringing, the schema she's bringing. She made that connection to that, so which was really great. So through this, you'll also see, so we'll go through this idea of the green group through the EET tool, and that is usually the main name of what we're talking about, or the piece of vocabulary. And then we go through these pieces: blue dew, what does it look like? What is it made out of? Pink parts, white where, and what else do we know about it? And so it's not even really super fancy. I have it out. All the kids have this as a tool on their desk. I have it here shown in this slide with the pictures right out in front. But then I'll just draw them on the board, and we discuss it and we talk about it. And when we first started using this tool and in the descriptive teaching method, we really only started with a few. And the first one I started with which was the easiest one: what does it look like, right? What color, what size, what shape? So that those were easier core words for my students to be able to locate. They were very familiar with them. So for us to ease into utilizing this tool, we started there. And then we started building pieces on. Sometimes I don't use some of them. They don't make sense for the activity or for the vocabulary word that we're using. But it really gives this nice visual support and a nice structure to be able to kind of guide us through finding these words, understanding the vocabulary and the meaning behind, and then how does that connect to our text? All right, I'm gonna go next. So I talked about that making meaning, and you saw the little video of Lisa making meaning. And here was another one that we did, which we were just so proud of her. We were describing what a throne was, and kids were saying it was it was green. We had a picture up that's in the background there. It's something you sit on, and Lisa just kept coming to birthday, and their speech and language pathologist was there with me, and we're like, well, birthday, boy. Not really sure how birthday describes that throne. And I said, can you think of another word that might describe the throne? What else? And so we tried to get her to, we could talk about the color, you could talk about the size, what does it look like? What could we do? And she just said no. She kept telling us no on her talker and kept going back to birthday. And so finally we just stopped for a minute and we're like, Lisa, do you have a special place at your home that you sit in when it's your birthday? And she said, yes. And I'm like, does it remind you of a throne? Is it special? And she went to special and she said, yes. And so it was so amazing to see her make connections, deeper connections than I would have thought of. If we wouldn't have stopped and taken a minute to kind of think about how is she connecting this? How can we make meaning of what she is saying and make a connection? If we wouldn't have stopped, we would have just said, no, birthday is not a throne. That's not right. That's not what we're talking about. But instead we stopped and we asked some pretty deep questions, and she was able to expand. Oops, sorry about that. On that, which was pretty impressive. And we again we celebrate Lisa a lot. She's a pretty amazing emergent communicator. So making meaning, and every student's voice can be heard. Pretty important. Oh, all my videos are kind of having some problems. So I'll explain what this is. This was another making meaning video of our student, Eli, and he was building his sentence of what it feels like. We were talking about courage and what it feels like and what does courage mean. And this was a hard one. You can't say, what does it look like? We tried, and that was hard. And what we came out to is that it looked like a lion, but how did that really actually make you feel? And so he said he feels like a tiger. And we're like, you're right. when someone feels big inside, like they feel like a tiger, that they feel like a lion, they have that inside of them, they feel that courage. And so it was a really beautiful connection for him. And I'm sorry you can't see that video. So if at the end I can try to pop some up into my YouTube channel, I will. I knew I should have thrown that one in too, so sorry about that. Here's another example down here in the corner of this video. It was a video that we would play of lions roaring and growling, so they could really understand some of that language that we were using within our book that talked about when the lion started to growl and he started to roar in that scared Dorothy. And so we would step back and say, well, what is a growl? What is a groan? And we were expanding here. We had already done that pre-work with the expanded expression tool, the EET tool. And so now we were building that into sentences. Some of their IEP goals are expanding and creating grammatically correct sentences using their AAC devices. And so we were expanding that in this work. But having that YouTube video in the background and on our interactive screen really kind of brought that to life and was very engaging for them. Okay, let's see here. Here we go. Oh, this video, I'm hoping it'll play. Let me see if it will play. It's not going to. No. Okay. So again, I will come back and try to get this video, but I'll explain it. So as we were building and our understanding, our schema, our background knowledge of what a heart does, we're using the tool to create meaning. And then we got into all right, now in our text, we're having an interactive piece, an interactive reading activity. And I loved this interactive reading activity. And I also love how Readtopia will give me like, say this and do this. It really has some nice pieces for the teacher to be able to follow along. So one of the things we did is that while I started reading the story and that chapter of the Tin Man, when we heard the word heart, they needed to respond by saying or raising their hand. And so we cut out little hearts, and that Eli and Steffi, then the video shows them listening for the word heart as we were reading. And then they would raise their hand when they heard that word, that vocabulary word that we had done so much pre-work on. And they were now really ready to make a connection to the text by raising their hand or raising their heart to show that. The other piece that the video also shows is that I utilize a lot of modeling techniques during my teaching. So I utilize, we use Read and Write for Google Chrome. From Text Help in our district. And so every chance I get, I model those assistive technology tools. So students have these tools of speech to text on, their IEPs and on accommodations. And oftentimes what happens is that we forget that we need to teach them, that they don't necessarily know how to press play and pause right at the same moment while they're listening and while they're reading. And so we model this daily with all of our texts that we do. And so while they were able to listen to the modeling of the text to speech being read on the computer and then raise their heart, and it was pretty amazing. Sorry that video is not working for you today. We'll try to go back. Try to go back and get that. So I loved, I wanted to just spend a little extra time on this slide. So, because one, it's really clear, and I had this great video for this one as well. Our STEM activity that we used during this time was making a big green head out of paper mache. And so now we wanted to be able to use that, and we displayed different, the kids using different phrases from the book to be the wizard or to be the witch. And then we put that through a projector and onto this big green head, and it looked pretty cool. So I'm hoping I can pull that up for you in the after this is all done. So again, bringing in meaningful activities that really got them engaged and had them right there with me during that whole time. So what we wanted to do was add more to our descriptive teaching and using the descriptive teaching technique into our expanding expression tool. Because sometimes if they're not really even sure what the meaning is, or they're not really sure what core words to use to describe using this tool, and they're not really sure still what that word could be, then we look at adding, what does that sound like? What does the word start with? And so we started adding that into what else do we know, and adding that technique in. And that was really powerful, because as we then move, as I said, reading, writing, communication, and listening are so interconnected. As we would move into a writing activity, for them to be able to maybe write a sentence about this witch was really powerful, because now they could use an icon, they could use their QWERTY keyboard and find the letter to add in there. They had more knowledge of where those items were in their AAC devices. And so sometimes, one, it's just not enough to understand what these words are and the meaning behind them. But if you're an AAC user, you need to know where they are as well. And so we spend a lot of time, which I think this tool gives us, in locating those words, in modeling next to them these words, expanding the sentence. So, excuse me, here we had that fire mean, and so they wanted to find this exact word, and so we wrote out there this feel, stare, afraid, or scare to scared, to be able to add those morphological endings, is which we were working on with our one student, to be able to help her find that sequence, that icon sequence. And then building it into adding more. How can you expand what you're saying? Instead of just saying to me, angry, what else could you say? She is angry. How could you say how you feel about her? I don't like her. So those type of taking a moment and taking the time to really do the modeling and to explore their devices on where those core words were and are. And then for them to be able to do it themselves. I use a lot of the technique where, I do it, we do it together, they do it themselves, that kind of gradual release of responsibility. And that gives us the time to explore and work with that, with the EET tool and with the descriptive teaching technique. So here you can see, we looked at the white, what does it look like, and where they had teeth, green head, face green. So going from, our emerging communicators that are usually one icon, and expanding that and really modeling that +1 for them, and having them then go back and then add that and create that together. It didn't make sense for what is it made out of. I didn't want to get into, what is a head made out of and brains and stuff. We weren't really, wasn't our point. And what the parts were. We had already described what a face looks like. That wasn't the piece that we needed to be describing, and to really understand what the witch was and what the meaning in that vocabulary. But we did talk about where, and this was great, because every single one of my students went to their icon of the book, and they knew exactly where this witch was from. she was from The Wizard of Oz, and that was such a great moment. All of us celebrated that. And, you know, this is probably, I think it's around chapter 8, maybe 6, I can't really remember, in The Wizard of Oz. And so we had really been working on that concept. And so that was very exciting for us. So where it was in the book. And then again, like I said earlier, so bringing in some of that descriptive teaching techniques of, you know, what does it start with? What does it sound? What does the word sound? What does that first letter sound like? You know, you could even say, what does it rhyme with? There are lots of, when you get into descriptive teaching, the technique, I'm working with that sound and that word, and what does it rhyme with? What is it like? What does it match? But we just started with, what does it sound like? And what does the first letter begin with? So here's some more examples of bringing in some more videos to be able to describe. My students didn't have Blackbird in their talker where they thought it was going to be in the animals area. And so we talked about, how could you describe it? How could we, and then using this tool to be able to really understand what this Blackbird was and what does it do? And also with the scarecrow, you know, and making the connection now between the two. What does a scarecrow do? You know, a scarecrow is there to scare the blackbirds away. And so bringing those two together was really important. What we loved is then we built a scarecrow, and then everybody was, you know, singing scarecrow songs. And so our students then decided that our scarecrow, who are preschoolers, decided to name Bobby. Why, I'm not really sure, but they named him Bobby, and they decided that he needed his own AAC device. So whenever my modeling device wasn't used, we would put it over there. So it wasn't there a lot because I use it all the time. Let's see here. So coming to the end, what I said earlier about that modeling, my students have had 2 years, and my paras have had 2 years of us modeling without expectation, modeling 1+ or 2+, depending on where they are in their journey of becoming AAC users. And so you can really see that. And this was just a beautiful moment. And I wish I would have gotten it on video, but this was my friend Steffi. We just finished up a session, and I was talking to her speech and language pathologist, and we were talking about what we were going to do the next day or where we could go with her. And she was standing right next to her, and I look to my side, and there she is modeling to the scarecrow and teaching him where all the words that we had just focused on and some of the vocabulary that we had just focused on. And it was brilliant. And so I had my speech and language pathologist, I'm like, you need to keep talking to me so she doesn't know I'm taking a picture. And so I try to snap a few off to the side. And it was pretty incredible to see that she understands the power that modeling can bring. And it was a pretty beautiful moment. I want to thank you. We're finishing up a little earlier than I anticipated, but that's because some of my videos weren't playing. So I really appreciate the time that you took to be here with me this afternoon during summer vacation to look about how important it is for us to bring vocabulary and do that pre-work with our AAC users. It's just really important. Here are some resources that I've used to do some of the things that we talked about today. And I'm just going to go back to the modeling because this page is nicer to look at. So kind of bringing it back, reading, writing, communication, and listening are all intertwined. And it takes all of those pieces to make a reader and to make a writer. And for our individuals that have complex communication needs, We need to stick to the research, and we need to use the tools that we know are that have that evidence behind it, that evidence-based, to be able to bring this to our students so that they too can now be active participants in their reading and shared reading and interactive reading activities, and not just passive participants. So thank you, everyone. I'm gonna see if I can get these videos to do that. So I'm gonna just stop my share here.
Do it. Try it, Sharon. While you're working to pull that up, we had one question that I thought I'd read to you real quick.
Okay.
Someone wants to know, when you are working on those activities where you're pulling out the different vocabulary that the kids maybe are not as familiar with, they said, are you pre-teaching the vocab before you read the text, or do you teach them as you go when you're kind of working through that? I hope that kind of makes sense.
Sure. So I know that the vocabulary that is in the chapter that we're going to be reading, and so I will pre-teach that before we go through and read the text. So I will highlight some of those words, especially when we're going to be doing an interactive reading activity through that text. You know, you're typically reading through and then making a comment, asking a question, you know, having some of that response. And so if they don't have that vocabulary to work with, then that becomes a very passive activity for them. So I found that I kind of had to step back and what I love about Readtopia is that you can utilize the activities and the units in any way you need to. And so I will go and find if the video is appropriate, or if I need to find a YouTube video, if we need to stop and do a STEM activity for them to be able to have some hands-on, for them to really wrap their brain around and be immersed in that vocabulary. So I typically do that. And then we will do those interactive and shared reading activities, usually a couple times, where then by the time, and then oftentimes, when they're just reading snack, that's when we just read it through. So that's how I've gone about it.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, if you want to try videos, go for it. I just want to say I loved some of the pieces that you shared. I loved the modeling to the scarecrow. That was awesome. I loved the idea of immersing the students in the topic. So the heartbeat sounds in the background, or lion roars, that it's not just about a visual representation of the thing, which is important also, but there are other ways to kind of, really pull in all the different parts. And I thought that was really great to bring out as well. So thanks for sharing that also.
Yeah. I'm gonna see if I can. I think I showed you. We were able to watch the video of Lisa, correct? With the Valentine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay. Let me see if I can upload really quick.
And it is amazing, these AAC users, some of the ways that they can express themselves if we give them the chance. I remember working with a student who we were talking about snacks, and he used the symbol for chalk and then light, and I had no idea what he was talking about, and it was chocolate. He wanted chocolate.
Yes.
But it took a while to gather that. So I loved your example of the throne, where not exactly sure what you're talking about, but let's see if we can figure it through and see.
Right. And if we wouldn't have just taken a minute to be able to, see and listen to what she was saying, and presuming that she knew what she was talking about.
Exactly.
Right. If I would have just said, no, you don't know what you're talking about, and just gone on, it would not have, we wouldn't have been able to have that minute in that moment. So, and that's where that presumption really comes into play. And it's really, if we wouldn't have presumed that, then we would have lost all that. I have a few videos, so let me see if I can come back and share. Were there any other questions?
I don't see anything else in the chat right now.
Okay.
If you do have a question, feel free to add it to the Slack chat, and I'll vocalize those for Sharon while she works through these videos too.
Okay, so this was the video of bringing the lion in. We were gonna do, we also did a play from the Wizard of Oz. And so we were making our set throughout this whole journey that we took through all the units and all the chapters. And so this was just, I didn't get a really good video of the lion roaring while we were doing the EET tool, but I did do it while we were making a lion's mane. And so it would just roar, and they loved it, and they thought it was so fun. So I'm gonna stop share and see if I can find that last video of Lisa. No. Oh, here it is. All right, let me press pause and come back to you. Share my screen. All right, this is Eli and Steffi, and they were listening for the word heart in the video. And in the back here, you can see how we're using, and I'm modeling using the text-to-speech tool and pressing pause and start and stop, and so that it was up on the screen as they were going.
Spoke. If he gives me a brain, he can certainly give you a heart. 25.
Did you hear the last one?
Yeah.
You did. You heard 2 of them.
So it was so powerful, and they were so excited and so engaged in the literacy and in the book and in the reading of those words as they were looking for that tool. So I'm gonna stop share. I think if I have time, and if there are people still around, I can find one more.
You're good.
I just felt so bad. Those videos weren't working. I'm gonna make sure they're working for tomorrow's sessions. That's for sure. Don't think I have another way to show it. Actually, I don't. I think that's it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to find a way to get those videos embedded. It was working seriously 5 minutes before we started the session.
I can verify that it was actually working before. Well, thank you very much, Sharon. We appreciate your insights and your experience and the things that you shared. Give us good things to apply in the classroom or with our families or however we're working through these. So thank you. And thank you for all who attended this session. We hope you'll join us tomorrow for new sessions of AAC in the Cloud, and we will see you then.